There was this line from back when Trump was president, which I think is quite prescient today, where people would say that Trump was taken literally but not seriously, whereas people take Xi seriously but not literally. So if you actually take what Xi Jinping says literally, actually listen to what he says, it's really quite alarming, some of the things that he does say about what China's role is in the world, what his ambitions are for China.
Welcome to the Exponential Investor Podcast. Want to be a better, smarter, more clued up investor? Well, you've come to the right place. We cover the breakthrough investment ideas you don't hear about in the mainstream to keep you on top of the megatrends and opportunities reshaping our world.
Hello and welcome to the Exponential Investor Podcast. I'm Kit Winder and today I'm joined by Boaz Shoshan in Sam Volkering's absence. Boaz, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Kit. How are you getting on today?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Thanks for joining us this week. Now, Boaz, it's a treat to have you on the podcast, and you're something of an expert in the Southbank ranks on sort of, I guess, US-China relations, and you were very early on a lot of the anti-China sentiment that is now becoming more mainstream. But I had a question that I wanted to put to you, which is that China seems to be on an unstoppable rise. It's been doing so for a couple of decades. It's gained huge control over critical industries and resources. And America, to be perfectly honest, is struggling in lots of ways. It's politically polarized. The gap between rich and poor seems to be widening. A lot of the policies around wealth creation and taxes are coming under huge scrutiny. And it's a country that seems to be struggling. It doesn't have huge control of its own supply chain. Militarily, it's starting to struggle relative to other world powers. So it seems as if we're moving to a multipolar world where China and America share the limelight. So is it sensible that America is taking this more aggressive anti-China stance, or in the sort of world of soft power and I guess cooperation, would it not be wiser to cling aggressively to a model of friendship in the future, despite China's many transgressions?
Well, I must say that's quite the question to be starting with, Kit, and a very flattering introduction. I wouldn't call myself an expert on US-China relations, though I have managed to call a few of the moves on the chessboard quite well so far. It's a very big question that you ask, and I think to a large degree, a lot of people do agree with that route. There are a lot of people, especially when it comes to corporate America, they want to tell you this tale of we need to be close. It needs to be a close relationship with China. China's sort of appeasement policy, or what some if you're on the more hawkish side, they'd call it a frenemies policy, where we still need economic integration with China. But we can try and maneuver around them with various military means, strategic means, and of course, America still has sort of financial dominance over China. I don't think. I don't think on a military level, the US and China are by any means equal yet. It's a very long way away. China does not have a blue water navy. They are certainly building an awful lot of ships all of the time at a quite alarming rate. But when it comes to actually being able to operate anywhere in the world's oceans, and being able to funnel the logistics that having a blue water navy requires, which we have in this country, and which the Americans do, and a couple other nations do as well. China is a long way away from that. So I don't think military parity is we're close to it yet. Though of course China is aiming to get there, and they've made that really quite. They've been very vocal about that. They've been very open about it. Just nobody wants to take it. Nobody wants to take it seriously. There was this line from back when Trump was president, which I think is quite prescient today, where people would say that Trump was taken literally but not seriously, whereas people take Xi seriously but not literally. So if you actually take what Xi Jinping says literally, actually listen to what he says, it's really quite alarming, some of the things that he does say about what China's role is in the world, what his ambitions are for China, and of course he is still very, very strong within China in general. There's a lot of there's an interesting debate as to whether or not Xi Jinping has the unparalleled power through the party that the image is projected, or whether or not there's actually lots of internal power struggles that he needs to keep in play at the same time, and whether or not there may be a time when he would be betrayed by somebody or something like that. But ultimately, you need to be a proper China hand to understand all of these things, and that is something I am not. But when it comes to military parity, I think the US is still very much in the lead. There's a lot of a lot of things going on now with hypersonic missiles, with the launches of various Chinese missile tests. But I do think that the US is still very much ahead of the game when it comes to that. I think that's quite key when it comes to whether or not a superpower needs to bend the knee towards a rising power.
Okay, but in general, what we've seen over the last year is a trend towards more, I guess, antagonistic policy moves by America, both Trump and Biden, and a sort of wider support for those within the public and the rank and file of the American politicians, and to an extent in the UK as well, maybe slightly less so in Europe. But do you think this is a wise move given the trend that China is on?
It's a good question. It is a very good question. Is this really a wise move? I guess it depends how you define wise, and I guess it depends on. To me, it comes down to a question of morality ultimately, which is if you let China do whatever it wants. I mean, it's showing you what it's doing, whatever it wants, what it does when it does whatever it wants. We're in Xinjiang, right? So this is it's quite clear what's going on there. We've known this for a long time. And nobody really wants to say anything about it. So I think there's a sort of a moral element that you do need to stand up to China in a lot of ways, and that you do need to have an aggressive policy that is deterrent in its consequences ultimately. So I think the idea that you just need to respect power because power's there. Is not something I really agree with. It's very much an appeasement mindset. This is the kind of thing that people, and this is a cliche now. This is the kind of thing that people were saying in the 1930s, right? We need, Germany. There's some things we disagree with, but no, we don't want war. Remember that massive conflict we had, etc. etc. So I think it's great that there is actually much more antagonism here because there's a saying from Richard Nixon, which I think is very prescient here, where he wrote that he agreed that the Chinese Communist Party took the Leninist doctrine that you must probe with bayonets, and if you encounter mush, you proceed, and if you encounter steel, you withdraw. This is referring to how you treat your enemies ultimately. So if you encounter weakness, you encounter softness, you encounter a sort of appeasing policies, well, you should just make the most of it and keep going and going and going until somebody actually tells you to stop. And if you look at how the CCP have managed to treat and roll over all of these European politicians who may have an issue with things like human rights, they've been incredibly effective at doing that. So all that's happened is we've just said, yeah, you guys can do whatever you want, and we're going to open our markets to you, and you can take our industrial bases ultimately. And we'll all make money together, and we won't say anything bad about you guys because you guys are going to become liberal and democratic at some point in the future, and we'll just keep repeating that to all the people who maybe have a problem with it. So probe with bayonets has been incredibly successful, and ultimately you need steel to stop that. That's the only thing that will cause that withdrawal that Nixon referred to. And Nixon knew an awful lot about the Chinese Communist Party, as he's the one who sort of started off the entire Western re-engagement with China once again. So in answer to your question, Kit, I would say that I'm very happy that some steel is being offered to the Chinese Communist Party rather than mush.
Okay, so yeah, all excellent points. And you raise, of course, the very important issue of what's happening in Xinjiang with the Uyghur population there. And I guess I have 2 points on this. Firstly, that I would love it if we offered, a lot more steel with regards to that one issue. But I'm not sure if it's entirely correct to say that because of, the antagonistic policies we're seeing are entirely related to Xinjiang, or that we are seeing a sort of international community awakening on that front. And so I guess I'm questioning to what extent that is the cause behind everything that we're seeing.
I'll interject there actually, Kit, because I understand what you say, though I would say that what is going on in Xinjiang is a facet of the Chinese Communist Party, in that it is showing you the kind of beliefs that they have and that they're willing to impose, and it shows you their character. So ultimately, while what's going on in Xinjiang is not Of course, that's not entirely the reason why the U.S. military is now incredibly, afraid of losing all of these supply chains to China, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's been going on. I mean, they've been worried about that for a very long time. But when it's showing you the character of the Chinese Communist Party, and this is certainly helping the international community recognize what that character is and why they should be more afraid of it. So it's just showing you a shade of it. It's not that this one event is the reason why all of this is happening. It was the same with again, to use the cliche, it was the same with the Nazis back in 1930s, right? The whole eugenics thing that they had going on, whole racial purity. That was not the reason why everybody was getting worried about them, right? It was because they were this huge economy that was really aggressive and really expansive and very militaristic. And so here we are today, and we see something similar. What goes on in Xinjiang, I think, it just reveals the character of what the CCP is, and that's one of the reasons why people should be worried about it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the question I asked at the outset was directing us to this debate, which is around the intentions of the Chinese Communist Party and how aggressive they are and how far they stretch. And you talk about the things that Xi Jinping has said. How do you read I guess, what the Chinese would view as it's not, I guess, a rise to power. It's a second coming. They feel as though they have been a global power for thousands of years, and all that's happened over the last couple of years is a sort of brief hiatus. Do you feel that they have incredibly serious sort of global domination ideals that they're working towards over the coming decades, where they really want to overtake America, be the sole global power? Or do you think that they are going to be content with a multipolar world?
Yeah, again, it's another good question, Kit. It's a very big question. It's probably above my pay grade, really. But I would say that I think it's a bit of yes and no. The whole manifest destiny thing, this sort of once and future power. I've no doubt that China could be a huge superpower. I mean, in many ways, it is a superpower already, right? But when it comes to this idea that, well, we were really big in the past, like China's GDP used to dwarf everybody else's many years ago. And they've got this mythos of, how this is sort of the rightful return of the Han. And we've got this is the return, the ascension of the Han Chinese, all this stuff, which in a lot of ways, again has echoes of things that are not very nice. But I think the idea that simply because it was once a huge economy does not necessarily mean it's destined to become that again. It obviously is a huge economy now, but I'm always a bit dubious about this whole China's 100-year marathon and things like this. There's this here in the West, we have this idea that China's run by these mandarins who understand everybody, and they're always playing the long game, right? These guys know how to play the long game. Here in the West, we're just obsessed with the next election. All of our domestic, industrial, and economic policies are always just being run by politicians who can only think 4 years ahead. And as a result, over here in this autocracy, right, this dictatorship, they can make the plans that last the test of time. And this is, it's a very persuasive, compelling narrative, right? But when you look at things like the one-child policy, and then you look at things like the actual health of their agricultural land, now that they've really treated it very poorly because they're going for these really high GDP measures. So they've just nuked the soil with all these chemicals, and the land isn't nearly as fertile as it used to be. It makes me wonder as to whether or not this is part of the mythos of China, whether or not it's really true, whether it actually reflects the reality of China today. But the problem is, I'm never going to be able to go to China because of all the bad things I've said about China. So I'm never going to be able to find out for myself.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the argument that politicians there are just as bad as they are here is probably equally compelling. Moving on then, if it's not going to be the Asian century, if that narrative has been perhaps overstated, I guess one of the most immediate threats to China's short-term ambitions is probably still what's happening in their property market, which started with the news of Evergrande, which managed to, affect investors' perceptions of the future returns on equities for about a day, and seems to have gone away pretty swiftly since. But there have been a number of other bankruptcies and missed bond payments from other companies, from other property companies in the sector. Since then, it's some people would call it a bubble that's been building for a decade or more. It's heavily indebted. It's facing onerous regulation. Property sales are falling rapidly just in the last month or two. And I was wondering how seriously do you think people are taking this threat, and do you think they're taking it seriously enough?
Well, I would add a caveat to that sentence you started that question with, Kit. I think I'm not saying that we're not going to see an Asian century. There is a lot more in Asia than just China. And I think, for example, India, I'm actually incredibly bullish on India over the long term, which has plenty of its own issues, but not quite the same as China's. So I think Asia is a very interesting place to be an investor. I do think there is a huge amount of economic prosperity that's going to be unlocked there in the fullness of time. And of course, they have much better demographics than us over in the West, which is always going to be a help, especially in places like India. But to answer your question regarding Evergrande, the Starbucks latte size that everybody got really, really afraid of for a short period of time. Now suddenly nobody seems to care about it anymore. It is quite remarkable. I think it's that grey rhino risk. People have been worried about Evergrande for a long time, and then when it seems like things might actually go wrong, people stop caring about it, which is quite interesting. It's almost this thing with it's almost a bit like how your imagination is always worse than the reality. Like people's fear of an Evergrande default is greater than the default. But whether or not it is actually going to default in a big way, we've yet to really see. I think people are looking at the bond coupon payments, whether or not they missed that. It's not that when we're kind of waiting for something like a really big outright default on something before things get wrong. And of course, everyone's attention span these days is like that of a gnat. So people get distracted very quickly, and they don't pay. They're not keeping their eyes on the ball. I think one thing with Evergrande is again, it fits back into the Chinese Communist Party and what they want. So whatever happens with Evergrande is going to be is a function of political economy, to use a $9 phrase, where effectively whatever happens is probably what the CCP wants to happen. If they want it to default, then they'll let it, and if they don't, they'll find a way of patching it over. One thing that the CCP have been incredibly good at is stoking private credit, which is something we're very bad at here in the UK and here in the developed markets, where they're very good at actually influencing people's desire and demand for credit, because you need private credit growth to really drive your economy. So you need businesses taking out loans. I mean, that'd be the biggest one in order to get your economy going. China's managed to do that. There's obviously excesses, which you see in the likes of the property market, where people are just getting out loans to build houses in the middle of nowhere, which no one's ever going to live in, etc., etc. But I think China is going to find a way of keeping that private credit engine going one way or another in order to keep their GDP figures higher. Maybe that'll slow down a bit, but I don't think it's going to really taper off in any meaningful way anytime soon. So I think the Evergrande spectacle, I actually think they're probably going to find a way of keeping it alive. I think it's going to remain a grey rhino risk, and if ever it suddenly charges onto the scene and gores loads of investors, it'll probably be because the CCP wanted it to.
Very interesting. Well, Boaz, it's been a great conversation, as it always is with you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on again. Next week, Sam will be off again, so either Boaz will be back or we'll find a different guest for you. But until then, thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and bye for now.